is CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. Ukraine says it shot down over 40 Russian drones after Moscow launched a New Year's assault on the country. Our other headlines: New Year, new currency and new border arrangements. Croatia becomes a fully integrated member of the European Union. And thousands of people gather in the Brazilian capital for the inauguration of Lula da Silva as president. Ukraine says it has shot down more than 40 drones after Moscow launched a New Year's assault on the country. Blasts are continuing to be heard in the capital, Kyiv, with people taking refuge in bomb shelters and underground metro stations. In his New Year's address, President Zelensky said his one wish for 2023 was victory for Ukraine. But speaking in Moscow, President Putin vowed to continue the offensive, saying it had been a year of difficult, necessary decisions. Our correspondent Stephanie Freed reports from Kyiv.
Well, as you noted, Jamie, numerous missile strikes or missile launches, airstrikes on the part of Russia on major population centers in Ukraine leading up to the new year. Explosions, 8 of them here in Kyiv, and 1 person killed here in Kyiv. Also, as you noted, then leading up to and then the wee hours of the new year, Ukraine's military says that they shot down 45 Iranian-made Shahed drones that were buzzing in the skies. One of those drones had what they say, or what we've seen, is a Russian New Year's message for Ukraine. You know, leading into and now into it being in this new year, the morale here is low as one would expect. Soldiers on the front lines are trying to have little mini, or they have had mini celebrations. The mayor of Kyiv, Klitschko, went to visit soldiers in the toughest area fighting in Bakhmut. But people aren't really feeling it. However, there is one demographic group that we followed leading into 2023 that feels compelled to celebrate. Let's take a look.
Thousands of Ukraine's parents are ushering in 2023 by focusing on their children. The Kyiv New Year Kid Fest is a conduit for laughter, getting lost in the music, and cutting loose.
At night they hear some bombing sounds and shooting. They are afraid of this, and I am, as mother, want to take my kids to such play to feel the little bit of freedom of their soul.
Pervasive uncertainty, psychological damage, developmental delays, and regression are but a few of the well-documented effects war has on children. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, half of the world's 80 million forcibly displaced people are children.
I'm a mother with 2 children. This is so important for children's eyes to shine with happiness and peace. Everything we do for the children.
Today's performance is the first this season that hasn't been interrupted midway by the blast of air raid sirens forcing cast and audience members into the underground theater shelter.
If I mentally prepare myself before the performance, then it's easy for me. And I like doing this, despite the war. I enjoy it.
Within hours of this performance, Russian missiles struck nearby, killing 1 person.
Most Ukrainians I've talked with say they're not celebrating this year. They prefer to stick close to home, spending time with friends and loved ones.
Strategies parents employ to help their kids cope include playing games, reading books, exercising, crafting, and blocking out the noise.
We turn on louder music because we don't want them to hear the bombing sounds.
Bringing kids to a show like this provides brief respite, But the longer-lasting message is, I'm looking out for you and taking care of you. Stephanie Fried, CGTN, Kyiv, Ukraine.
New year, new currency and new border arrangements. Croatia rang in 2023, becoming a fully integrated member of the European Union. At midnight, the Balkan country bid farewell to its kuna currency, becoming the 20th member of the Eurozone. Many believe this will be a boost to the economy, although the change has been rather divisive, with some fearing higher prices amid the cost of living crisis. Croatia also entered Europe's 27-nation-strong passport-free zone, known as the Schengen area.
Today, Croatia joins the Schengen area and the Eurozone, two immense achievements for the youngest member state of the European Union, and both reached on the very same day. So indeed, this is a day for the history books.
Well, CGTN's correspondent Alyosha Milenkovic reports now from Croatia's border with Slovenia.
For many Croats, this was an event they had been looking forward to for decades, as the barriers between Croatia and its EU neighbors came down. Croats can now travel as far as Portugal, Estonia or the Netherlands without encountering a single border check along the way.
Only now, after entering the Schengen area, have we become a true part of Euro integration. Opinion is split on Croatia's membership of the Eurozone. But about Schengen, everybody thinks the same. People don't like restrictions. They like to have freedom of movement.
Just a day earlier, at the busiest border crossing with Slovenia, cars were still queuing for those checks. Stopping at the border police booth and handing over passports and papers was an inevitable routine.
We are witnessing the final hours of this border crossing that has stood here for the past 31 years, ever since Croatia and Slovenia split from Yugoslavia back in 1991. In the high season, people waited here for hours just to cross it.
Just 24 hours later, Slovenian President Nataša Pirc-Musar, Croatian Prime Minister Andrej Plenković and President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen jointly crossed this now invisible line. And while it was all smiles at the Croatia's borders with EU neighbors, the situation is vastly different at the borders with non-EU members Bosnia and Serbia. At the Tovarnik border crossing with Serbia, border police are combing the area, searching for illegal migrants attempting to cross over.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we don't expect any changes in that area. We are fully equipped for the task of protecting the external EU borders, both on the border crossings and in the fields.
Local border guards say don't expect any major migrant influx following Croatia's membership to the Schengen area, but will remain vigilant. Yet there is concern that regular traffic for Southeast Europe will now divert from Hungary towards them, as this route is shorter and now also borderless. Alyosha Milenkovic, CGTN, Bregana border crossing.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, crowds of people gather in Brazil's capital for the inauguration of Lula da Silva as president.
I can't wait to tell the story of a real China to the world.
70 years ago, a small group of British businessmen travelled to China to unlock opportunities between the two countries. They became known as the icebreakers.
I'm travelling around China, introducing China to the world. There are so many stories here to tell.
So my family has been connected with China now for almost 150 years. My task now is to set us up for the next 150 years.
Each side has a huge amount to offer the other. Neither is right or wrong, and each can learn from the other.
These are the foundations that create the links between ordinary people.
Trying to see China as a process rather than a fixed point.
Over the last 25 years, I've been connecting China with Scotland, Angus with the Antilles.
We should be encouraging even greater two-way exchange.
By far the most important thing is to tell stories.
Manchester's been my home and Wuhan is my second home.
Meet the bridge builders, the individuals who dare to think beyond the horizon and open up our world.
If we can build bridges, we can learn more from one another. That can only lead to good things for both sides.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Ukraine says it shot down over 40 Russian drones after Moscow launched a New Year's assault on the country. Our other headlines: new year, new currency and new border arrangements. Croatia becomes a fully integrated member of the European Union. Two of the UK's nuclear power stations risk being closed next year because of the government's new windfall tax on electricity companies. The Telegraph newspaper is reporting that the French energy company EDF may have to close its sites in Hartlepool and Heysham. The UK windfall tax on low-carbon electricity generators came into force on New Year's Day. Well, our correspondent Andrew Wilson is following the story for us. These two UK power stations, nuclear power stations, supply 4% of Britain's energy needs, the crucial backup to wind power. This is significant, isn't it?
Well, it is, because this is the season of worrying anyway, and there is an energy crisis, and there is a war in Ukraine, and the government and the private sector are all taking another look at how we treat the whole prospect of fossil fuel energy supply and renewables, and how we distribute it, and what the chances are of it being regular and so on. And a lot of debate about how reliable wind power can be, because we had a very still, in terms of wind, still November in 2022, and that alarmed people a lot, because they even had to fire up a coal power station that had been redundant for a couple of days or even up to a week, because the shortfall in electricity supply coming from the wind turbines that weren't turning. So this is a discussion we're going to keep having and keep being seen to be had, particularly in the papers and at governmental level and the rest of it. So, yes, these two, Heysham 1 and Hartlepool, these two power stations, 2 out of 5, all supplied by EDF, the French energy company. They supply the kind of electricity you'd expect to go to about 4 million homes, 4% of the power, as you said, on a cold day. Let's look at how the power breaks up in this country, because it is quite revealing. For a start, coal is almost insignificant as an energy source now for electricity. 0.7% of our electricity comes from coal. Wind, now 34%. That's a pretty high percentage given the changes over the last few years. But gas still coming at 38%. Gas is the one they want to target and bring down using combinations of renewables and nuclear. Nuclear currently coming in at 12.8%. There are 2 new power stations that were supposed to be already started to being built, but there's been arguments about that. But they're still in the pipeline. So these 2 power stations that we're talking about, EDF were considering putting these to sleep anyway. They're pretty old, by March of 2024. So if they come under threat a little earlier, it's not a complete game changer, but it does show that the energy companies, to start off 2023, are reacting against this windfall tax and putting out this appearance and signals and the odd whisper that their businesses might suffer having to accommodate this windfall tax. It's more likely to be an early salvo against the government plans to tax them than it is necessarily to be pulling energy out of our homes.
The energy squeeze rumbles on in Europe and in the UK. So too industrial action. Strikes have obviously been a major headache for the UK government over the previous year. The government now preparing for possible strikes at seaports. We were talking last week about the industrial action at airports. Now seaports under consideration.
Been a grim old season of strikes. There's no getting away from it, with nurses and transport workers, rail workers and all the rest of it. Throw in the doctors, teachers, lawyers and also the ambulance drivers. The papers have had a bit of fun with this one, though, because Border Force, who man essentially the passport control booths in all the UK airports, Travellers, or anecdotal reports from travellers, suggest that things have been easier since they went on strike. The army have been brought in, 800 personnel, to replace those Border Force staff in the airport passport booths, and people report that things have run more smoothly. In fact, there have only been 7 occasions in the 8 days of strikes where expected mandated waiting times have been exceeded. 2 hours at Heathrow, and only by about 15 minutes, and 1 hour at the other regional airports, Gatwick, Birmingham, Cardiff, Manchester and Glasgow. So that hasn't been a particularly effective blow to the government, if you like, although the soldiers don't want to be deployed in this job because it's not their job. However, the union leaders are now saying the Border Force might come out on strike again, but not only in the airports, but in the seaports as well. And when you think of seaports, you worry a little bit about Liverpool, but you worry an awful lot about Dover. Dover has got an awful lot of traffic coming through it, and also it's a very specialised port because the customs duties on both sides and the border control duties on both sides are run in tandem with the French authorities. So it's a much more sophisticated system and not so easy just to deploy private soldiers from the army to come in and check people's passports. It's more complicated than that. That could have a bit more of an effect on traffic in and out of the country.
It might be a new year, but the old problems go on for the UK government. The in-trade really is piling up, isn't it?
There's an impatience growing, and I suspect when Parliament sits again that there are going to be some calls within it for people to say, OK, what is the government up to now? What are your plans for growth? What are your plans for the economy? What are your plans for a brighter future come 2024? The issue of the Northern Ireland Protocol still needs to be resolved, as do other details in terms of the Brexit divorce arrangement with Europe. But this government, for now, still remains bogged down in the problems that it's inherited from 2023. The boats will keep coming across the Channel. The immigration question of deporting unwanted visitors back to Albania or even Rwanda, that's an issue that's still on the cards to be dealt with. The energy issues that we've talked about as well, the Border Force, and, of course, all the other strikes, all the public sector strikes that are still promising to continue their industrial action into the new year. It leaves Rishi Sunak as a Prime Minister who would, in ordinary circumstances, be eager to define himself in the public eye and show the public what he stands for and what his aspirations are for the country, but in fact finds himself firefighting the same old problems.
Andrew, thank you for that. Our correspondent, Andrew Wilson. Inflation hit record highs in Spain in 2022, prompting the government there to announce a fresh $10 billion aid package just ahead of the new year. The bailout extends some previously announced benefits like free short-distance train travel and freezing evictions for the vulnerable. But others, like the subsidy on gas, is to be scrapped. Our correspondent Ken Brown reports now from Madrid.
Queues form here every Saturday in southern Madrid. This food bank has seen a huge increase in the number of people registering, with grocery prices remaining out of reach for some. As winter sets in, the demand for these charities in the city has never been higher.
People who have money are feeling the effects of price rises, so imagine how it is affecting poor families. Some families can't even put the heat on at home. They have to choose between heating their home or whether to eat, so of course they have to choose to eat.
This is Cruz. She lives in Aluche with her young daughter and is currently out of work. She is part of one of 350 families that rely on this service, and there are another 150 on the waiting list.
It seems it will only get worse. We are already in a bad situation before the new year, but I think things will get even worse in 2023.
Spanish consumers are more vulnerable than their European counterparts to inflation, as this country has one of the lowest minimum wages in Europe at just over $1,000 per month. Only Portugal and Greece fare worse. Inflation may have dropped in recent months in Spain, but a report by the World Economic Outlook paints a worrying picture for 2023 for the country between falling growth and stagnant wages. Spain may have to wait until the following year to experience more economic stability. The government has said it's trying to keep inflation on a downward trajectory and has extended its electricity price controls until spring. For those here in Aluche, the main concern is just getting by and hoping that next year looks brighter than 2022. Ken Brown, CGTN, Madrid.
Russia's economy ministry has released its annual report on the country's financial performance in 2022. Instead of the 3% growth expected before Moscow launched its invasion of Ukraine, the prediction is now for a 2.8 contraction. Nonetheless, the Kremlin's describing that as a success. Our correspondent Stuart Smith reports.
As residents of Moscow go, Masha's income is pretty average. She's not one of its richest residents, nor one of its poorest. She's the owner of a cat and the single mother of a teenage girl. For her, the economic impact of the so-called special military operation and the subsequent sanctions means spending less and saving more.
A few years ago, we used to be able to go to Europe, we could go to Asia, but now you'd think twice and choose traveling around Russia more. Tutor fees for the kids, doctors and healthcare and clothes too have gone up in price. Some things I can deal without, some non-essential items, including clothes and food. Anything that's outside my basic consumption list is getting more difficult to buy, and now I don't usually bother budgeting for these things.
Outside this market, in a poorer area of Moscow, similar concerns.
Milk went up, bread, sausages, everything went up in price. Mayonnaise, everything.
I have a lot of grandchildren and was planning to buy them gifts, but now I'll have to adjust my plans and buy something cheaper.
Across town, in the centre of Moscow, everything's a bit more expensive. Many people are buying gifts for the New Year holiday, and here there are different worries.
I'm not greatly affected by price growth. Some stuff maybe used to be 5 to 7% cheaper. Maybe some gifts for the kids are now a bit more expensive to get here. So we've cut back a bit for that, but generally everything's fine.
Services have gone up in price and utilities. When I compare my November and December bills, the difference is 3,500 rubles. That's a significant increase.
While Russia lost access to its foreign reserves, international transactions became significantly more complicated and some sectors nearly collapsed. Swift central bank interventions combined with record oil and gas prices meant the economic shock was buffered. That's meant the economy as a whole held up more than initial predictions.
The negative forecasts made by many experts and Western analysts have not come true. According to the Ministry of Economic Development, Russia's GDP declined by only about 2% in January-November compared to the same period last year.
The plan is to use reserve funds and borrowing to make up the expected budget deficit. But 2023 will be tough for Russia, according to its central bank. The country survived the shock of sanctions. Now it's trying to mitigate the grind of sanctions. With the ever-present risk, more could be implemented and loopholes tightened. And Russia's residents are responding. Consumer demand is significantly down, which concerns the finance ministry as people choose to save for the troubles ahead rather than spend. Hundreds of thousands are off to fight. Hundreds of thousands have left the country. It's an unprecedented new dynamic in modern Russian history, and the impacts of that massive change are due to play out in 2023. Stuart Smith, CGTN, Moscow.
Throughout the year, we've been meeting people who dedicated their lives to building relationships between China and the UK, bringing the two countries closer together. Max Burns' passion has brought him more than 3 million followers on social media.
70 years ago, a small group of British businessmen travelled to China to unlock opportunities between the two countries. They became known as the icebreakers. Meet the bridge builders, the individuals who dare to think beyond the horizon and open up our world.
Hello everyone, my name is Max. I'm a food vlogger. I lived in China for about 13 years and then moved to the UK about 6 years ago. After moving back to the UK, some things that I really miss, I think the biggest two are my friends, and the second thing would be the food. I can't get over how much I miss the food, because everywhere I lived, just going downstairs and the street is just full of street food, like all different restaurants and stuff, and in the UK is a lot less of that culture, and I really, really miss that. I started making videos shortly after moving to the UK. Foreigners try this traditional Chinese snack or guessing these lyrics or, you know, stuff like that. I think it's when lockdown hit is when my cooking videos started to become the main video idea, and making a Chinese dish at home came to mind. My main audience is Chinese-speaking people in either other Asian countries or China. Across all the platforms, all my accounts, I probably have over 3 million subscribers at the moment. I think people really like the family aspect of my videos, the relationship I have with my parents and my little brother, the little like jokes and stuff. And I think a big part of why the videos were successful at the beginning was because it was a British kid speaking fluent Mandarin, cooking Chinese food. It offers a window into, you know, my family in England, a British family culture for Chinese viewers. But I'm also spreading Chinese culture through food and through traditional snacks and stuff to English people that are around me, to the British population.
You eat one between lessons.
Oh, you eat one after a lesson? Wow.
I got loads of support from my parents at the time because we just moved back and they didn't want me to forget my Chinese. Doing the videos helped me stay in touch with the culture and the language as well, so they were really happy for me to be doing that.
Look at that. Oh my goodness.
Oh, that's delicious. The flavour. Chili.
I think the view of Chinese food is kind of skewed by Chinese takeaways and Chinese buffets and stuff in the UK. I know a lot of my friends, for example, or just people I speak to, their view of Chinese food isn't a very authentic view, but that's not really their fault. There's not a lot of readily available, super authentic food in the UK. Or if you go to a Chinese restaurant that does have authentic food and you're English, they'll often give you the English menu, you know, not the proper Chinese menu.
This is called folded ear root.
I've never ever seen this before.
I've done a few different types of videos where I introduce traditional, authentic Chinese food and snacks to English people who don't know much about Chinese food, like letting them try yue bing, like traditional mooncakes. I did a video on that. I did a few videos where I have a few English people in the kitchen and I'm teaching them a proper Chinese dish.
They teach you how to make your own chili oil.
My friends and family that I show these Chinese dishes to, they often react in a way like, oh, I never realised you have to do all these steps, or, you know, this seems so complicated and stuff. I think one Chinese dish that all people should at least try one time to make at home is smashed cucumber, because it's the easiest and most fun Chinese dish to make. You literally just whack a cucumber till it falls apart and then make it into a salad. For cross-cultural understanding, I think food is a really good place to start, because it's one of the most accessible ways to share culture, you know, and then through that food you can learn a lot about a country's culture. Like through English food you can learn a lot about, you know, how international we are. But then with Chinese food you can learn how national it is, and everywhere you go is completely different. Each place is very true to being Chinese, you know, which is kind of like the polar opposite of the UK, where the UK kind of adopts a lot of other cultures into their cuisines. Today I'm going to be cooking mapo tofu. When people ask me where I'm from, I kind of find it hard to answer that question, because growing up in China and now living in the UK, but also being from Bulgaria, so I've always felt a bit like, I guess you could say, a global citizen, yeah. Chinese food is my culture, so I'd like to showcase my culture to whoever wants to see it. China is massive, and there's many different styles and cuisines and cultures within China. You know, in the Western view of China, people don't understand there's a lot more to it, not just in food and culture and tradition as well. I hope to spread awareness of all the different cultures within China. I think there's a lot to share.
And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. More news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's Razor. For now, from me, it's goodbye and Happy New Year.